And I apologize for the experience you had, and I believe Dr. Lacatina, please reach out to us so that we could, maybe spend some time with you and hear more about your individual concerns. Mr. and Mrs. Rollins? Yeah, you were bobbing back and forth.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's hard to see you.
Thank you. But to answer your budget question, yes, absolutely. I mean, this is the time. This is why we need to have these conversations prior to budget season. I don't know what's going to happen. That's why we're doing our homework and our research now. We may come back to you and be like, hey, look at what our neighboring districts. We're doing a great job compared to what everybody else in the state of New Jersey is doing. I don't know if that's going to be the answer. It may be that, hey, we're short a staff member or two, or three, or four. We need to build that into the budget. I'm not sure if that's going to be our answer. But we have to do our homework as administrators and do our research with Dr. Lacatina, Ms. D, our teachers. So I mean, we're taking your concern serious. We're looking into it, and we're doing it at a good time. We're not doing it at a bad time. If we were having this conversation in May, when the budget was over, it would be a different story. Anybody, administratively, I don't want to say anybody in education, but anybody that's looking to make an educated decision takes their time. You don't just rush to a decision. We see knee-jerk reactions all the time, and we say, why would they do something like that without thinking it through? We're thinking this one through, and we're taking our time, and we're planning for what the future of Fairlawn and the REACH program looks like. So we're way ahead of the budget schedule, but good question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to let Mrs. D go.
Please.
She's got a PTA meeting.
Thank
so
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Oh, hi. Mike, if you wouldn't mind.
I'm going to be passing out to the board once the board starts talking.
Okay, well then they won't be able to, I'm going to be reading some numbers, so they won't have any way of. Okay. So one of the things, in addition to some of the issues that my husband brought up a few minutes ago, was when asking for services for REACH, I've been told that unfortunately there's not enough money. This has been come across from educators in the school. So one of the things I thought was important to do was to take a look at how the budget has changed over time. I'm also aware that the state of New Jersey has imposed a lot of cuts on school districts, so it's not just Fairlawn, and that it's challenging to then work within those means when you've had money taken away. So if you look at the school year from 2007-2008, the adjusted budget was $335,000. And if you look at today, well, for this year, there's no budget available, but the budget is $219,000. These numbers come directly from the Board of Education at Fairlawn and are available to the public. And that is roughly about a loss of 42%. One of the other things that's also very significant is the amount of money that's being given for things like supplies. And surprisingly, for the entire district, only $1,000 is allocated for supplies. And some of the data that's available to parents, if you look at the latest year, it broke down for each school, and my son's elementary school, Milnes, was given $210 for supplies for the entire school year. And just to sort of put that into perspective, I spent $65 alone on Benjamin's school supplies for the school year. Supplies are not cheap, and especially when you're dealing with a talented and gifted program where it's not just a notebook or a workbook, it's legitimate things that people need to run this program. You can see that there have been major cuts and major money that is no longer available. So I just thought it was important. I know Dr. Lacatina, the program that you put together is amazing, and some of the detail is really great, and to hear about the different ways that you're taking care of the children is very important. But I thought it was also important to raise the financial component, especially since this did come up in this, in the summer when we were given some money.
Sure.
Thank you, and thank you for your time.
Oh, you're very welcome. Can I just piggyback a little bit on the supply piece? So there are also supply accounts in the individual schools, so that you will notice in some of those years it was more than 1,000, even though 1,000 was budgeted. They went over closer to 2,000. When they need supplies, we find the money for the supplies, and we also supplement it. So if there's a particular school that needs something in the past, we take in, they go to their principal, and we can get the supplies through there. But it definitely has gone down since then.
start?
Michelle O'Brien.
Thank you.
So what was your last name?
O'Brien.
O'Brien.
Thank you.
So I too am a Mills parent, and my son is a second grader, and we moved to Fair Island strictly for the schools. I should probably point out that I have been a teacher for 24 years, and my husband is a teacher for 25 years. So we are very well versed in differentiation and all the educational terms. I love the program that you presented, and I thank you for that. But one of my concerns, or my main concern, is that what's on paper and what is going on in practice in K-2 is not really what I'm seeing. They're two different things, at least in notes. The brochure that you mentioned, we did receive it this year, but out of the past 3 back-to-school nights, this was the first one we ever got. So I just want to bring to your attention, I don't know if it's specific to the school, or if, maybe it's different in other elementary schools, but that is my concern. Because I know as a teacher, and my husband being a math teacher for 25 years, that my son excels in math. I know that differentiation is going on with the reading. I'm not quite sure that it's happening with the math. Additionally, I am a little disappointed in the funding numbers that were passed around. And I would like to see a program where the standards for pre-K through 8, for the gifted programming standards, for the gifted National Association for Gifted Children will be implemented into the program. It didn't seem like they were necessarily in yours, but I did like your program and like what you presented. But my concern is really what's going on in my elementary school, because that's not what I'm seeing. Additionally, that is no reflection on our classroom teachers. We love our classroom teachers. I would never say anything bad about a classroom teacher, but that's just my concern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Hi, my name is Daphne Starker. I have two young boys in the school system in kindergarten and first grade. Our first grader, he just happens to be a quick learner, grasps concepts beyond his age, and I will agree that there's a good differentiation in the reading, no differentiation in math whatsoever. I can say that we had no clue about the REACH program until recently. Last year we've had a bit of a frustrating time getting an email from his teacher saying that he is disruptive in class without having any realization of his advancement and the fact that he's truly bored in class. He's doing 1 + 1 in class where in fact he can do multiplying and division. And we met with the principal, we met with his teacher, we met with the math, with the district math director. We were promised again and again that there's going to be differentiation and not busy work, but the same story. He got coloring sheets, he got the same exact schoolwork, and we reached out several times, and at one point we just gave up because there was no one was working with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before you guys talk, we're going to have to shut it down to go to dyslexia, but does anyone else want to talk that hasn't talked yet? I'm a real quick with that.
A subject that my principal just left, but, oh no, she put it, that I brought up last year when Isabella started kindergarten was acceleration. Because Isabella was reading at 2nd grade level when she started kindergarten. And she was very frustrated in the classroom. And she refused to go every morning. I battled it for 2.5 months, and I gave up. But so one subject that I brought up to Ms. Lindsay is like what's happening with acceleration, what's the policy in the district. And she told me that the district doesn't do it, and I was very shocked because there's plenty of research that says that acceleration is beneficial for gifted children. They usually think about their grade level, they can relate to all their peers because their brain is somewhere else. It's not necessarily with their age peers, but it might be with peers that are more advanced grades. And the response was that we don't do it in parallel. So I would like you to consider the rich teachers and the people who are revamping or redoing this program is to consider acceleration. It might not be the answer for a lot of children. This is a case-by-case basis. Some kids might not do well in an advanced grade, but some might do. And we should consider those cases. So the kids are not bored out of their minds and having issues.
What are you considering acceleration, just so I can understand your definition?
There are
of it?
different ways to do it.
That's why I'm asking you.
You can just, if she's advanced in reading, you can just put her in first grade reading or second grade reading for that period. Or you can, if they're advanced in all ways, you can just put them in first grade or, put them in a grade level where they are actually challenged and their brains can do stuff. She was doing the A's and the B's, and she was reading the second grade level, so she was absolutely bored. And I completely agree. At some point I was asking myself, why am I sending her to school? Like, if she does know all this material. I have to say first grade has been amazing so far, and she's been engaged. And I also think it depends on how the teacher deals with the students, and she already has them all evaluated. She's an amazing person. And she's working with them at a grade level, so far so good, but kindergarten was torture.
Thank you.
I promise I'll be super short. When it comes to evaluating how we're doing against the others, we might look at it and say, oh, we're kind of on par, near the top. But when it comes to, again, like with the special needs, and you can just take a look at sports or anything else, you have the question, do you want to be on top? Do you want to be the leader? And I personally think it'd be amazing to be part of a school district in a town that is a leader on something like this, because I think we're a leader when it comes to special needs. I think we do wonderful jobs, and I think it shows. Everywhere you go, everyone talks about how Fairlawn is. It'd be awesome if we could also talk about the gifted side of it as well in that same perspective.
Thank you. All right, so what we're going to do, hold on, you're first. I promise you're going to forget what I have to say. No, you circled it really. You circled it really. All right, here's what I'd like to do, just in the essence of a little time, okay? Please give your comments or ask, questions to Natalie, but let's be cognizant. Let's just be cognizant of what we're asking. And obviously, this isn't going to be the only discussion on this topic, and this is going to be worked on. It's going to be a work in progress. This was for us to get information on what was going on and where they see the program going forward. And it was very important to hear from the parents out here too. But now we need to give the administration time to digest what they've heard too. Okay, someone.
Yes, I just want to reassure the parents there who had concerns that the administration will look into it, and I'm sure it will be straightened out in a timely manner. When this topic of REACH came up during the summer, I had asked for it to be done in a timely manner, and I want to thank the administration for fulfilling that promise that they had made that they would be doing it. Perhaps I overreacted in the summer when this topic came up, because what I'm hearing now are exceptional things that are happening in the classroom, and I'm very proud to hear of the type of program that is being run for our REACH students. So I want to retract what I had said at that time. It's totally run differently. The questions I have, if I can find them on this paper, what happens, first one, what happens to our students when they get to middle school? How is this continued in the middle school program? I know the high school has AP classes,
Right.
but what are we doing in the middle school?
So in the middle school, there are the accelerated math classes and the enriched English, social studies, and science. And then as we move forward with the new middle school concept, that is something we're going to be looking into. I think, again, when we talk about fifth graders going to the middle school, it's not just about what does the fifth grade program look like. I think it's what does 5 through 8 look like, and should we be rethinking what enrichment looks like for middle schoolers as well. So we're going to be exploring the thought of exploratory classes and, things like that I've brought up. But right now it is academic, subject-based in the areas of literacy, math, social studies, and science.
I only have 2 more questions. The other question is, I'm assuming that these kids enter the REACH program every year in September, October, after the evaluation is done. Is there any possibility for a child to enter at a later time because maybe he didn't acclimate himself, wasn't too sure of himself at the beginning of the year? Can they go into it in,
Yes,
January, February?
Absolutely. So our 4th grade goes in January.
Yeah, but I'm
that
talking
being
about the
said,
lower
at
grades.
times different, absolutely. Because again, especially at the lower grades, that developmentally they're all over the place.
Right.
And so a student might need a little time to kick into gear. And so we have constant conversations with teachers, and we encourage the teachers to reach out to our REACH staff. So yeah, we have kids that enter. You can contradict me if I'm wrong, but
We're always reevaluating, yes.
Thank you.
and
Go ahead.
And parents can reach out to the classroom teacher, who will reach out to the REACH teachers.
And the other question is, after each year, is this program evaluated so that it can be modified, changed in whatever manner it needs to?
We've met many times over the course of the last several years. If you look at what the program looked like 15 years ago when I first came to this district, long before I was in this position, and now it has morphed many times over the years. So yes, we get together and we look at what are the activities we're doing, is it working? Again, that 7-day, that wasn't always there. That's something that is on the new side. Incorporating those behavioral characteristics on a formal basis is something new. The COGAT is something new. We used to use something called InView several years ago. So yes, we are always checking to say, do we think this is giving us the information we need, and is the program what we want it to be? So we do.
And leaving on a positive note, I just want to say kudos to everyone who's involved in this particular program, and I'm very happy to hear that parents here are saying they moved into Fairlawn because of the school system. So that's a plus for all of us, so thank you.
Thank you, Emma.
Okay, so I just want to start by saying that everybody on the board has their area of expertise. We have lawyers, we have facilities, related people, educators, we have accountants. I apologize to whoever I missed. But I'd just like to say that I see part of my area of expertise as understanding program theory and understanding program implementation. And it's with that lens that I bring to give my comments and questions here and ideas for the future. I also want to reflect back on the parents. I really don't think they're here to remedy a situation for their individual children, although I can imagine they care deeply about their individual children. I think what we have in our hands here is system-level things in a program that goes across 6 schools in an organization that has a $103 million budget. We're a big system, and this is a bigger issue than any one individual child, teacher, or school. So on the topic of the program model itself, so let's just talk about the program model itself as you very kindly presented. I think what I see are 2 possible things to reconsider about the program model itself based on what you've shared. Not even talking about implementation issues, just looking at the program theory itself. So the first thing is there's confusion in the community because some people say, oh, REACH, that's our gifted and talented program, and then other people will say, oh, REACH, they say it's for gifted and talented, but it's really for everybody. And the fact of the matter is that there's multiple components, and some of them are open for everybody, and some of them are for kids who are tested and screened and allowed into. So I think those parts that involve engineering, the parts that involve like potential makerspace, that's stuff that should be for everybody in 21st century learning. And to call that as part of our gifted and talented offerings, even if the Renzulli model has a justification, I'm not familiar with it, that might say that that's actually the way to go, I would just want to question that as to whether that makes sense in today's world where engineering makerspaces become very mainstream and isn't seen as something that people naturally associated with gifted and talented. And should maybe fall under the STEM offering. So that's one consideration for theory. The second thing is I think a lot of the concerns I hear from community members at least, and echoed tonight and reflected in the presentation, is that we're starting to screen kids, we're not screening kids really until the 3rd grade part, is the first 3rd grade assessment point, formal assessment point. And then they're not getting any differentiated pull-out instruction until halfway through 4th grade, which this becomes even more of a probable issue because We're now planning to move 5th graders up into the middle school environment, so you're talking half of a school year using this model as the entry point where they start getting that, which doesn't give the continuity of teachers really getting to know them over the years of their elementary school. So I'd really like to know, like, is there an evidence base for why we don't really formally screen for gifted and talented in a systematic way until 3rd grade? Is that something that could be revisited? And is there some way that we can make it happen so that this pullout happens earlier for kids who are truly have good, reliable, valid evidence that they need something more than what teachers probably can provide them in what's increasingly large classes with diverse student populations? The other questions I have, so that's just about the program model, and I know I'm going fast and I can write this out to you, Natalie, so don't worry. The other things I want to talk about are actually how it's implemented. So you have program theory, like this is what's supposed to be happening, and then you have like, is that actually happening in practice, and are we getting good data across 6 schools, across grade levels, across teachers, that this is actually happening? And I, as a board member, am uncomfortable accepting like, well, this is what we're hearing, or informally we hear about this, or we kind of have this as part of the evaluations. This isn't meant as a criticism, but just as an area to do better and make progress in these areas. I would like to see a more formal process evaluation of this program. Not saying it has to be done in 1 month, or done, whatever. Like, but we could I wanted to put more money toward REACH when we had the additional state aid to really understand how this program is working in practice, and we had that opportunity. And part of that process evaluation could be like, ask teachers, are they using those enrichment cards with students in the classroom who the REACH teacher have identified as people who need that? Like, so we have the cards, something new, like, are they being trained on it, or is that something that we need to help them do more, encourage, or make it more formal part of the evaluation, that specific behavior? I also think that we definitely need to talk to multiple stakeholder groups. You have parents' experiences, you have teachers' experiences, you have the central administration's experiences, and until you actually talk to, like, survey people about their understanding of what the REACH program is, what their experiences have been, you're not going to ever get a full picture across the 6 schools of what's happening on average and who's being underserved that could be better served in the future. And part of that could be just simply assessing teachers' understanding of basic gifted and talented research, what we know about gifted and talented children, and making sure that, like, if they are not scoring as high as we want, that we have professional development seminars and faculty meetings to address the specific knowledge gaps within that school. I think that's reasonable. The final thing I'm going to say, I'll stop for the sake of time, is that if this 220,000 number is accurate in terms of, like, if that's a good accounting number, I'm sorry I was on my cell phone. It's been a really long day. I'm tired, and I myself don't identify as gifted and talented. I was trying to figure out what percentage of 103 million is 220,000. Quick math. What percentage of the budget is
0.2%?
0.2% of the budget going toward a program that serves at least 10% of our elementary school students, with the elementary school student population growing in size, so the sheer volume of the number of students served by this program, it sounds really off to me. It doesn't sound reflective of what this board and this community values, and I think, I'm not just saying we should throw money at the problem and then like just hire more people and assume there's some real deep implementation issues and some theoretical decisions that are being made. But I don't think if that continues to be the percentage of the budget that goes to this program, that we're going to be able to really make progress as quickly as we need. And I'll just say to my board colleagues and to the administration, my request for us as a board would be that at some point we get a report, like something written, maybe a little more than a PowerPoint presentation, like results from some data, something we can look at and think about, and return to this as a topic within a work session in the next calendar year to really be able to keep pace of what the administration is learning on this area, and to be able to work as part of the team and going toward progress, which I know we all want.
So, I'm going to make it short. Everything you said, the administration is looking at it. That's what we're working on. I mean, we were asked, you had said you made a point for extra funding in August. We heard it loud and clear. And I said that I don't make knee-jerk reactions as a superintendent and make educational decisions on a whim and a bunch of people come into a meeting saying, we need to give more money to REACH. And that's not what this is. We want to make educational decisions. You just asked us to do that. We're taking our time this year. We're doing our homework. That's what we're here for, and we will be coming back. I don't know if it's going to be in the form of a report. it very well may be in another PowerPoint that says, this is what we're doing moving forward. But we are looking into it, that's what we're here for, and that's the direction we're going moving forward. Thank you.
I just wanted to say that, as far as the monetary aspect, I understand why the money went down, but the reality of gifted children, it's like 2 to 3% of the population. So if you're spending, the amount of money that's listed here is basically, that's like the teacher salaries. Every building gets, every teacher gets money to spend, every building gets money to spend. If you look through what was handed out, the owl pelts are $25 for each building. I mean, you're not, it's not a reach is a thinking thing. If you have the book and you do all those activities using the owl book, and that could be 3 months worth of activities, you had to buy one set of books. You know what I mean? So I don't see where, and I had 3 students go through the REACH program, and the answer to me, to your question about how do we know? Well, just look at the AP classes in the high school and the scores of the AP classes in the high school. I will tell you right now, I don't want any data about the students that are in the REACH program in 2nd grade, because I know students that read in kindergarten, and by 5th grade, they were in remedial English. Parents have the time to sit with them and teach them how to read, and then all of a sudden they have to really read and interpret what they're reading, and they can't do it. So they look like they were brilliant, and they're great. I mean, they have jobs and they're doing very well, but they never took an AP class at the high school or an advanced class at the high school, and were in remedial classes. That doesn't make anything wrong with them or anything bad, but if you met them in 1st grade, they were reading like extraordinarily. So I think, sometimes you have to look at the whole process, and the gentleman said he was in the REACH program and the advantages that he had, how that was the hour that he loved, and I totally understand that, and I'm sure you do as well, and I'm sure the teachers in the front do as well. But I like to look at the big picture, which is the whole student, and by putting them in this program, and I am not happy with this row, not with what I'm hearing. Okay, that does not make me happy, and that does have to be looked into, not by me, but administratively. But when we had the report that said how many AP classes and how many students got 4s and 5s on AP tests, those are the students that were identified and put into, went through the REACH program. So, the data of a 3rd grader, it doesn't really mean that much to me, when I look at what's going on as they move forward. Does the program need some adjustments? At this time, I'm saying yes, it does. And does that need to be, examined? I'm saying yes, it does. But I definitely think that, how we're doing at the upper levels is evident, and you want to have the best program. We might have the best program. That remains to be seen. So,
first of all, I want to thank Natalie. I want to thank
Kelly?
No, I remember. I'm sorry.
Jerry?
This is a salad, Jerry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
this is the salad.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. The teachers that came out, and Kelly D definitely. It was a very informative presentation. It was pretty much what we asked you to do, to come back with. Now, as I said, now it's the process of taking what you guys said in the audience, what the board members asked, and the administrative listening, to come up with how do we improve the program? How do we make sure that this is the best program for our students in Fairlawn? And I appreciate the time that went into it. It's one thing that I thought of, okay, because Mrs. D, when was Mrs. D put into that position of overseeing?
About 2 years.
Yeah, okay.
I
So
know it was a bit of a handful.
I see it improving, okay? And, you know, it's great that there is a principal that is overseeing it and looking at it besides, of course, Dr. Lacatina. So thank you, everybody, for coming. We're going to go. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to go on to dyslexia. All right, Jeff, can you sit down, please? All right. Now we're going to have a, I'm sorry, we're going to have a presentation on dyslexia from Camille DeFranco and Gary Pankowitz, Supervisor of Student Services and ELA Supervisor.
Well, thank you, everyone. Gary and I are really happy to give this presentation tonight to let you know some information on dyslexia and what we are doing as a district to address students with all reading disorders. And I just want to thank the board for having attention in this area and all their support in terms of access for all of our students and all of our parents and other supervisors who showed up tonight to also hear about what we have to offer. So the main focus of reading disorders and dyslexia came in about 2013 and 2014 when there was a new law passed which required school districts to add certain components to their day-to-day functioning and curriculum and assessment of students with reading disorders and dyslexia. This law made sure that all school districts in New Jersey had to give screenings for students with reading disabilities, require PD for all staff, especially staff at the K-2 level, and also defined foremost what dyslexia was. This was absent in some of the previous legislation and absent in our administrative code prior to that. There was a common phrase of just learning disabilities in general, but not specific to dyslexia.
So just like in the classroom, anytime we could use a quick video to anchor our understanding of a particular concept, we're going to try that right now. We found an excellent video that could give us a 3-minute explanation of dyslexia that we'd like to share with you.
We've learned so much about what dyslexia is and isn't. We know it's a brain-based condition that impacts reading, spelling, and writing, but it's not a problem with vision. Dyslexia is a problem with understanding and working with language. Dyslexia is a lifelong issue that tends to run in families, so there's often a parent or a sibling who also has it. And brain imaging studies have shown us that there are differences in how the brain is structured and how it functions in people who have dyslexia. But it's important to know that dyslexia has nothing to do with intelligence. Children with dyslexia are just as smart as other children. We can see signs of dyslexia even before children learn to read. Reading is a complicated process that starts with being able to recognize individual sounds in words. Take the word elephant. Most children at a young age can recognize 3 parts in that word. Elephant. But the child with dyslexia might not hear that "th" is actually made up of 4 different sounds. I, t. They may only hear 1 or 2. Reading and spelling are hard for kids with dyslexia because first they have to hear those individual sounds, and then they have to understand that each of those sounds is represented by 1 or more letters. Children with dyslexia usually have difficulty with this basic language skill, which is called phonemic awareness. So you might see your child having trouble with rhyming or isolating the sounds in words. That makes it difficult for your child to match letters to their sounds, like knowing that S sounds like S or that SH sounds like sh. This skill is called decoding, and children use it to sound out words. We know a lot about what can help children with these skills. The most important thing is specialized reading instruction. A well-known approach is called Orton-Gillingham. It helps children to learn to break words down into their component sounds, match the sounds to letters, and then blend those sounds together. Reading programs based on Orton-Gillingham use multisensory techniques. So children might trace letters in sand while saying that letter and its sound, or clap out syllables in words. These methods are proven to be effective. There are also tools like audiobooks, text-to-speech software, and reading apps that can help children with dyslexia. You can help your child at home by reading aloud together every day. Choosing books that tap into your child's passions can help develop an interest in reading. Playing rhyming games, reading nursery rhymes, and singing songs can also be a fun way to help younger children build early reading skills.
So, that was a better definition than the 5 or 6, 7 lines that the state will give you. But I think the biggest stressor of the definition is that it is a disorder that is neurological in origin. It's important to remember that. It's a brain-based disorder. Many of the research that led to this point in terms of the change in law came from brain-based research, and the phonemic awareness element of it, or lack thereof, is really what kind of drives the bus in terms of how we're going to look at our treatment approaches for dyslexia. So the next piece that this law required, which is what we need to focus on as a district, is professional development. So we need to make sure that on a yearly basis that we have 2 hours of professional development for general education teachers, kindergarten to grade 3, special education teachers, basic skills, reading specialists, ESL teachers, learning disability teachers, consultants, and speech and language therapists. It could be on exactly what dyslexia is, screening for dyslexia, technology adaptations for dyslexia, and it can include workshops, conferences, and other kind of outside resources. We've done a lot of our PD in-house. We have had several of our supervisors lead it, and people from the literacy department lead that PD. The final piece, which is probably the most crucial, and I think what kind of gave the impetus for much of the change in the legislation, was that we do have to screen students who have exhibited some of the characteristics of a phonemic awareness disorder or other reading disability disorder no later than the completion of the first semester of 2nd grade, and that law went into effect for the 14-15 school year. So at that time, the New Jersey Department of Education kind of partnered with the International Dyslexia Association and gave a list of resources within the state for really like valid screening tools that we should be using. And that's what we have been doing as a district in following the recommendations from the state, coupled with the International Dyslexia Association. And again, early signs of dyslexia, just like the presenter said, difficulty rhyming, difficulty learning spelling rules, spelling words the way they sound. For example, for like, L-I-K, for like, using the letter name Dakota sound, L-font, L-A instead of L-lefont. Remembering the little words, like the ending words or beginning words. And sometimes we do find that listening comprehension is a bit better, that auditory component is better. They can listen to it, they can kind of understand. Students who possess these characteristics or have this disorder can understand a lot out loud, but that receptive reading element is a bit more difficult. There are other related disorders with dyslexia. It doesn't happen all the time. This is not just because you have one disorder, you're automatically going to have another disorder. Many oftentimes we see students with this neurological disorder of dyslexia also have other neurological disorders, such as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Sometimes they have also another kind of secondary diagnosis of dysgraphia, where that translation of words to paper doesn't happen so fluently. It's the physical act of writing. Writing is a pretty tough neurocognitive task. It is a bit labor intensive. When I was a Child Study Team member, I remember my learning consultant really teaching me a lot about all of the steps that are involved in that. And the third disorder that can go along with this is dyscalculia, which is a specific learning disability in math, and difficulty understanding number-related concepts. So sometimes knowing how numbers operate, the physicality of the number, remembering the sequence and order of numbers. Sometimes we find that students who are younger who have a difficult time rote counting or sequencing doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have this disorder, but it could kind of go in tandem with it. And how we treat it. So the International Dyslexia Association, which is kind of the go-to organization, not only in the state, but obviously it's an international association throughout the world. They recommend explicit, systematic, and sequential reading instruction that is multisensory in its approach. Everything needs to be multisensory. And why is that? Because, you know, just listening to it or just looking at it doesn't hit the mark. It almost has to become a part of their own neurological muscle memory to remember how these sounds integrate with the actual letter, integrate with the actual written paper. Orton Gillingham or OG-based programs and Wilson programs are really the go-to for this. And also giving access to assistive technology. Many students that we see as they get older, those kind of assistive technology devices or speech-to-text devices or word processing devices really do help them become more fluent and get through the everyday academic tasks that are required in writing and also with reading. And Gary's now going to tell you about all the many initiatives that we utilize in Fairlawn to treat dyslexia.
Okay, so I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity to share information about our word study program. Forgive my notes, we have such an intricate program, and out of respect to our teachers who do just such a great job of implementing these knowledge and skills, just want to make sure that I talk about our program effectively. So to start, our meaningful classroom reading assessments. I thought it might be nice to give you just a view of or talk about what our kindergarten assessments might look like in reading and word study. So to start in September, teachers do a concepts of print assessment. That's really for students to show that they know the conventions of literacy and of language. For example, you might hold up a book, ask the student to locate the front cover, track the print from left to right, to make sure that the students can locate a letter, to make sure the students can locate a word. So in talking to our kindergarten teachers, they talk about how important this assessment is, not just to locate the students' learning needs, but to possibly give a heads up in terms of knowing that there might be an OT issue, there might be a speech issue. The student might need support with vocabulary, background knowledge, and of course language. Some of our other assessments in kindergarten include letter identification, word identification. In short, when students are able to name letters, name words, name sounds with automaticity, it allows them to focus on reading comprehension and analysis. They don't have to spend that time decoding. So it's really important that we have those assessments. In addition, we do phonemic awareness assessments. So reading right from the directions of the assessments that our teachers would use. Today I'm going to say a word. After I say it, you tell me the sounds you hear in the word. If I say dog, you would say d-o-g. Let's practice one together. Tell me the sounds when you hear ran. So when the student does that correctly, we say good job, and we move on to the assessment, starting with particular words. And again, that is so important. We know that from that assessment and from our Phonics first programming, that the students need practice with these language skills. So I'm going to talk about Phonics first curriculum in a moment, but before I do that, I'm still going with the kindergarten assessment. So we also do a Teachers College independent reading assessment. So this is when the students would sit side by side with their teacher and read a passage aloud to their teacher while the teacher keeps track of miscues that the student, or errors that the students might make as they're reading. Some examples of miscues could be in terms of meaning. For example, does the reader's error make sense based upon the meaning of the pictures of the story? Maybe the student read happy, but instead the word was glad. Other errors that the student can make are in terms of structure and syntax. Does the reader follow the rules of grammar and the structure of sentences? Maybe the child read the word jumps instead of jumped. And the other miscue might be visual. Is the reader's error similar to the word on the page? They read the word even when the word was really every. You can imagine that when teachers are able to analyze the data from not just their running record or this particular reading assessment, but all of the assessments, they're able to find patterns of errors to drive instruction and also to support students' learning needs. We also do a fair amount of writing throughout the course of study. This comes in the form of dictation, where students are encoding their spelling through our Phonics First program, and also in terms of their longer piece writing. We always work in terms of narrative, opinion, information writing across the marking period. Again, as we mentioned in the previous presentation, teachers are sitting side by side and doing individual conferences. If not individual, they're looking at data and putting kids together in flexible groupings according to similar reading levels or strategies. Okay, so K2, Phonics First Teacher Training and Curriculum. So you can tell I'm really into hyperlinks, and I thought maybe this might be a good presentation to share with the community eventually, so I have a lot of videos in here. This is a 2-minute video of describing the training that our teachers receive. So everyone's aware already that this is our 3rd year of implementation with Phonics First. 4 years ago, we researched programs. We spent a lot of time in Tenafly schools, principals and teachers were in that school system. They talked with other teachers. We found that Phonics First was the way to go. As a result, we started Phonics First with our kindergarten program, and that was 3 years ago. 2 years ago, based upon the success in kindergarten, we moved it to 1st grade. This year, based upon the success of kindergarten and 1st grade, we're moving the program to 2nd grade. So teachers just recently received their 2nd day of full day in service or in training through Phonics First, and actually at the end of the month they'll receive their 3rd day. That day is not just training, it's collaboration. It's like, oh, I'm having trouble with this lesson, I don't understand how to do this, so it's a really nice day. We actually meet in this room with a certified trainer, and together we're learning more about the program. I'm really happy where it's going. So I just want to show you just a 2-minute view of what the teachers are doing within that training. This is right from YouTube.
Phonics First is an Orton-Gillingham program for K-5 teachers. It can be used as a core phonics program, RTI, or as a dyslexia or learning disabled program. Our Level 1 course is a 30-hour course that typically spans across 5 days. Phonics First is accredited at the highest tier by the International Dyslexia Association and by the International Multisensory Structured Language Education Council. We want to ensure each teacher's experience with Phonics First is exciting, energizing, and beneficial. We teach in a way that engages teachers throughout the entire course. When teachers leave our training, they will have all of the resources they need for implementing the Phonics First program in their classrooms. They will also be given lifetime access to our members area that provides them with other helpful tools and resources. If you are considering taking one of our courses, we applaud you for understanding the benefits of teaching students using an Orton-Gillingham approach. We weave the Orton-Gillingham principles of instruction throughout all aspects of the course content. Those principles of instruction are structured, systematic, sequential, cumulative, multisensory, phonics-based direct instruction. During the training, teachers will learn alphabet and phonemic awareness strategies, basic and advanced phonetic concepts for decoding and encoding, a 3-part drill for structured review, tactile kinesthetic spelling techniques for phonetic and non-phonetic words, higher level spelling skills, syllabication for multisyllabic words, oral reading, connected text fluency, and reciprocal reading strategies.
I really don't remember anything like this in college. It was sound out the words, maybe break it apart into syllables, but it didn't really get specific. This is a very systematic, controlled way of doing things. It gives students really specific strategies to use.
Well, me.
So that last teacher who was speaking, I feel like that was us 4 years ago. We were looking at particular lessons to integrate within our reading program. We didn't have a systematic, multi-sensory approach that had like a trajectory of scope and sequence in terms of our language skills. I want to just give you some examples. So, when I was sitting in Orton training myself, I was so fascinated to know that 85% of the words that we know are all associated with language concepts and patterns. I just shared a short one for you. So at the end of kindergarten going into first grade, one of the Orton lessons deals with open and closed syllables. So did you know, this is a little door by the way, if we have the door closed, okay, the O is a short not, right? If we open the door, the O is able to scream its name. Oh, no. Think about all the words you know that follow this particular rule. I didn't know this rule before Orton training. Think about the advantage our students have when they are able to acquire all these different rules, that it just doesn't come from wide reading. It actually comes from these strategic lessons that are part of a program. So I have videos here, but I think, in the interest of time, I just want to show the sand. Everyone talks about the sand trays. Do you have them in front of you? So I'm just going to show 1 minute of this video.
Hi everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the sand tray, which is one of my most favorite multisensory tools ever. Let's talk sand. We really want to emphasize multisensory components throughout all of the lesson plan. So one way of doing that is incorporating the sand tray. And specifically during the auditory drill we use the sand tray, and when we introduce a new skill or a sound. The reason we use the sand tray is because it ignites multiple learning pathways in the brain. When our students write their sounds in their sand tray, they have a higher chance of retaining the information.
There are a lot of alternatives you could use to the sand, like shaving cream, you could use rice, but there are some specific benefits to using this type of sand. It's color-coded, so you can see it's green and black. The black sand is coarser than the green sand. So when the student writes in the sand, the green sand falls to the center and the black sand is pushed aside, so you can clearly see the letter in the sand. Of course, our younger students really enjoy using the sand in their lessons, but that tactile element is so powerful, we highly encourage our adult students and our secondary level students to use this.
Okay, so you have the sand trays in front of you. You could play around with them. I know it's hard to resist, so feel free to look at those. And just looking at some of our other parts of the program. So we said 85% of our language is rule-driven, but the other 15%, there's no rules to those words. So we call those red words, and that's where we have to actually expose the kids to these red words or sight words and just practice them until they become common practice. So I'm not going to go through the whole drill, but we have the mesh in front of you. You put the paper on top of the mesh, and you use your red crayon, and you could write a particular word. So I chose the red word of laugh. So I would very quickly say the word laugh. I would make sure students know the definition, to giggle, to chuckle, to have some kind of ha-ha expression, usually when something's funny. After that, I might ask the students to use the word laugh in a sentence. And then I would ask them to create a bumpy version of the word laugh. To take their red crayon, write the word laugh, and whisper the letters as they wrote the words. L-A-U-G-H, laugh. We always underline when it's done. So we'll do that about 3 times. Usually things are done in groups of 3. And then I might lead the class in some arm tapping. So Lincrest School just taught me today that the arm tapping is so much better when you do it to some kind of melody. So if it's a 5-letter word in Lincrest, and this is a good thing about being a district supervisor, I'm able to work with grade level teams, so I can share the good stuff going on with Lincrest to the entire group. So I would hold the word with my weak hand out, and I have the word laugh, and I could say laugh, L-A-U-G-H, laugh, L-A-U-G-H, laugh,
and bingo,
L-A-U-G-H.
If this gig doesn't work out.
Right, that threw me off a little bit. Okay. There's like the voice is on right now. American Idol, there's a joke in there, but I don't know. So, with the word laugh. So after the students are able to do that, we might write the word laugh in the sky. Okay, laugh. L-A-U-G-H, laugh. Think of all the repetition that we've used. I want to say this properly because it's such a nice... By using multi-sensory approach to teaching a new red word, we strengthen connections in the students' brains and increase recall. Arm tapping the words programs a neuro-linguistic response that students can use to help recall. So that was all phonics first. We also have many of our teachers attending a 30-hour training from the Institute of Multisensory Education. Again, another Orton program. Everything's consistently Orton. And a new assessment that we brought into the district is the predictive reading assessment. This is really important. We were talking about that screening requirement. All of those indicators really help us see how to move our students' reading instruction and certainly, give us some information in terms of their phonemic awareness and fluency. But I'm just going to click on this predictive reading assessment because there's a nice fact sheet over here which talks about how this is a particularly good assessment in terms of screening for dyslexia. So PAR can be used as an initial screener for dyslexia because 2 of the PAR subtests directly assess areas that predict developmental dyslexia. Again, I'm just going to say what the actual assessment. I was trained last week with our literacy intervention teachers. We'll be training special education teachers on Monday. But it measures picture naming vocabulary. This is really interesting. The fact that students need to be able to have the background knowledge to name with some kind of rapid naming fluency. We're actually timing the students. Letter, word, calling, and phonemic awareness. We know that if students have indicators of phonemic awareness and fluency together, that they are going to need some kind of support by a literacy professional. Almost finished here. Thank you for approving an extra literacy coach in the elementary level. I could tell you that as someone who attends the North Jersey Roundtable and as an adjunct professor in the literacy department at Montclair State's grad school, we need more of these literacy coaches. And the fact that you heard that and allowed us to have a second literacy coach is going to do tremendous things in terms of supporting the collaboration with our teachers. Again, these coaches don't always have the right answer, but what they do is they support collaboration and relationships and just more discussion around topics so that we can have opportunities to continue learning. Another thing that the board certainly supports is our assistive technology across the curriculum. So K2, all students have access to RAS Kids. It's one of the things, too, that we ask our kids to look at over the summer, in those summer months, to prevent summer reading loss. We also have a board that supports the use of Learning Ally. Again, you've heard about this program, but that's where students are able to have audio versions of books. And what's great about Learning Ally is it's not just some like generic robot voice reading to the students. That would not be good. We want to make sure that we have live readers that are modeling fluency and the students are able to follow along in the reading as they go. Otherwise, it's just listening. It's not reading. And then Newsella. Again, you've been a supporter of the Newsella piece. We've just found out that there's this whole audio component that could mirror the thing that Learning Ally does with books in short text in Newsella, those short, timely articles. I just wanted to leave my go-to resource Whenever I want to research something like on the fly, readingrockets.org. I suggest that for parents and for the board, of course. I use that in my class at Montclair State, and I'm always sharing articles with teachers in district. It just had this really nice video that I thought was very positive and responsive to close our presentation. All right, it's from.
I love talking to kids about the process of writing, and they want to know how I learned to write and how I learned English, and you know, especially children who perhaps they were born in the U.S., but they don't have strong language facility. And I say, first of all, when I was a kid, I told her that, okay, and say jazz, and they all do the jazz, which is lots of fun, so we sort of loosen up. And I begin by talking about language acquisition, how I learned to acquire English. But inevitably, it leads to, it was a more difficult process because I'm dyslexic. And I tell them that I see it as the most marvelous gift. That yes, it is called a disability, and changing the name doesn't make anything less than that. It is not the norm, in other words. It is not the way many people learn. It is the way some people learn. And dyslexics have the strange advantage of seeing the world from a slightly different perspective. And I sometimes explain to them, you know, some people go through the wood A to B. It's quick and it's very efficient. But some of us, dyslexics are among them, we take the scenic route. And the things we discover and the places we see and the ways we get eventually to the other side make us very often very interesting people. It can also be excruciating. It can be tiring. It can take you longer. It takes me 5 times longer than anyone else to learn anything. But when I learn it forever. I learn it from the bottom up, from the inside out. I want to know every way it works. I want it to be on a hologram so I can get it. And I tell kids, if a second language, dyslexic, refugee, can go out to write books, you can do anything. Simply anything. Sometimes it's just one more step.
All right, I'm going to do it the other way this time. I'm going to ask for comments from the board, and then I'm going to go to the public, okay? So, Cindy.
This was a really an education meeting for me, especially with the dyslexia. I had absolutely no idea that there were so many facets in that diagnosis. I just thought it was when you looked at a word, the words weren't in the right order. I had no idea that there was so much involved, and I thank you for the presentation. It was very powerful, and I'm so glad that we are going to be reaching the students that need the help. And I just wrote underneath my laugh with the line, I wrote, wow.
We're not going to say what?
No, we're not telling you. Jean wrote.
Yeah.
Jean's in timeout.
After school.
I gave him the attention, so.
Can you say the word to bingo?
Jeff.
I have 3 questions. One is, I'm assuming that, of course, dyslexic students require an IEP, right? Or they get an IEP, being that it is a disability.
It is a disability. Every disability has to affect educational performance. So I don't want to say that every single child that may have this diagnosis might have an IEP. But we do have many students with this diagnosis or with a specific learning disability overarching special education classification within the district.
Okay, so, I mean, we saw a little bit what happens to, like, in elementary school, what's going on, but what happens to the dyslexic student once he or she gets into middle school and high school and still has all those challenges, especially in more technical areas like science, or even thinking like world language would probably be pretty challenging for a dyslexic student. What services do we have in place for them, and how are they dealt with it, and what supports are given to those teachers so they can still educate those? Because as the lady said, it was torture at sometimes, and I loathe to think that some of our students, some people have to go through that here, and that's no blame on anyone else. It's the nature of their disability.
Right,
But I'm very curious to know how we deal with kids, especially when they get older. Like, what are we doing for them?
So I think it depends on each individual student and what interventions they have been given before they've gotten to the middle school point. So I know of certain examples, being the elementary school supervisor, that they have an intervention at the elementary level, so their transfer to middle school could require still some sort of special education programming, if they are a special education student, whether it's a resource program, whether it's an LLD program, whether it's an in-class model. It could be modifications to what they're doing every single day. It could be copies of notes. It could be taking down some of the expectations that might make them nervous or not make them fluent in terms of what they need to access within the curriculum. And just like we mentioned, we do have the other assistive technology supports, and that's what I can speak to overall in terms of what I see at the middle school level and what my counterpart, Dr. Hesney, what he works on our Assistive Technology Committee in terms of letting teachers know, here are some other applications, here are some other backup resources, and depending on the student, depending on their individual needs, that might be allowing access to a computer right then and there, even during science, even during social studies, so that they can produce whatever they need to in terms of that writing sample or that lab sample. And we found that really that assistive technology piece is really helping our students as they get older, and then even as they're transferring to high school and even beyond when they graduate.
I should say too that Dr. Lapina and Mr. Franco are very smart in selecting teachers, not just at the elementary level, but also at the middle and high school for the Institute Multisensory Education training. When you get that training, because I've had the training as well, the teachers get access to interactive OG software, and what that basically does is it provides an individual program for the students, whereas Phonics First is a whole system program that's more full group and then some small group pieces. In interactive OG, you give the students a particular assessment, and then you're able to go and enter that data on the computer, and you find out where the student is in terms of their work-study learning, and it generates lessons for you and a whole path of study for those particular students.
And also the Orton Gillingham trainings that are at the Institute for Multisensory Education, they also have an intermediate level, which is specifically designed for teachers of older students. So it looks slightly different. You can imagine for a student that's trying to figure out how to code versus a student that knows the basic reading but is still struggling with some of those other pieces. So we do have different levels that we can send our teachers to as well.
It's more into word parts and segmentation, which is the next level from the earlier work on it.
Thank you. I was just curious about the IEPs and what kind of modifications they get. Thank you.
Emily?
Okay, so 2 questions. The state says that the screening for dyslexia can occur no later than the beginning of 2nd grade. So when do we administer the PAR and assess in the Fairlawn?
So the screening needs to occur for any student who's showing flags, markers, or signs. So there isn't a regimented day on the calendar year, because students that might be showing some of those signs could come up at any given point in time throughout the year. So those students are just assessed within that time throughout the year whenever they may be identified by their classroom teacher.
That could be kindergartners, 1st graders,
right?
Any grade level. But
Exactly. It has to be by that timeline.
Okay. And I'm just having a hard time wrapping my head around an example of where a student would screen positive for dyslexia but wouldn't have issues with learning in the context of the usual classroom practices, especially what you're teaching us about dyslexia being a neurophysiological, it's a real thing, that brains work differently, and this woman reiterating that people with dyslexia have as much ability to learn as anybody else, but tend to take longer to get there. So, and I feel like all classroom days are with 20 plus students in the classroom is time management and pacing. So can you help me understand why wouldn't having a student who's identified as having dyslexia would not get an IEP?
So I can't speak to every single student that just because they have a diagnosis of one condition does not automatically venture into the IEP process. Most of the time it does. Most of the time there is educational impact, but having an IEP is a two-pronged approach. It's meeting an eligibility category, and it's also demonstrating that level of impact which could not be addressed through general intervention. So that's why we need to qualify it in that kind of way. If not, then every single student could have an IEP within the district. And we don't want to, not only as a district, but just philosophically, say every single student is a special education student.
Every student with dyslexia?
Right, or any student with any other condition.
Dyslexia has a state definition
Right.
and the screening.
You're right.
It's a thing.
You're right.
It's not
Hold
like.
on a
You're right.
second.
You're right.
Because
So I'm just.
you're going back and forth at her, and that's not fair.
So, right. So there's two pieces to having an IEP. So I can understand why you're probably thinking, how could this make sense? How could this not happen? But there needs to be an educational impact. So for me to say to you that every single student with a diagnosis, whether it's dyslexia or any other diagnosis, is automatically going to have an IEP, really would be, overclassifying or predetermination. So I don't want to do that. But I do want to engage in a thorough process to look at the whole child, and that's what the child study team process will do.
And if I could piggyback a little bit, because I was in a conference a couple of years ago with a family whose child had dyslexia but had a 504 plan. So that was a case where that child did need some modifications. There was an impact, but the child perhaps did not, I don't know for certain, but perhaps did not meet the rest of the criteria for classification. And this child was getting pretty much straight A's, despite having that disability. So the child was getting strategies in Wharton, and it was enough that that child was able to apply that in the classroom, and with other accommodations was able to do well. And I sort of equate it a little bit when I think about ADHD. So if an individual is classified with ADHD, you will sometimes see a child classified because there are other impacts of the ADHD. Some children have 504s, and some students learn to sort of compensate, and we gave them the strategies and they're able to use them. So you might find multiple children with the same sort of diagnosis, if you will, that get different types of programs put in place depending upon how we see that impacting in the classroom. So I just thought of that one instance with this family where I know that the child had a 504 instead of an IEP.
And our assessment is better now. So let's say 4 years ago, before we had Phonics first, we would give the kids a pretest. And then after the students had that pretest, they probably would go home and study all the words they got wrong. Put so much effort into that. Not necessarily do a lot of work to understand the pattern, but be able to then get 100 at the end of the week. So that student would go unrecognized. Now with our current program, it's different. We don't even give all the students the words that they'll see on their end of the week dictation. We give them some of the words, and we give them a take-home sheet where the parents can see the pattern that they're studying, and then that dictation will truly assess whether the students understand the pattern or not. We didn't have that, let's say, like 4 years ago. It was a whole shift in how we're assessing spelling.
Elise.
I totally agree with what you're saying. Some of them have 504s and some of them have nothing because they just compensate because they're able to do that. I just wanted to say that, having been on the board for a while, this was something that was discussed, 20 years ago, and the early intervention, I know from my perspective, it's taken a long time for the government to catch up with what really needs to be done. And I'm so glad to see that this is addressed now, since 2014, but this has been being addressed in the classroom. I always thought that kindergarten teachers should have to learn reading strategies so that they could assess students that were having difficulty reading, because if they're remediated, dyslexia is not really a remediation because you have that for life, but if they can assess that and then learn the strategies to deal with it as you get older. think it saves a ton of IEPs being written for these like subsets of students that if it's not caught early, they become behavior problems, then they miss the lesson, then they have to get other remediation. And so I think this is like anything you can put into that first couple of years to identify issues that can be remediated while students are still in elementary grades, I think is awesome, and I'm happy to see this.
Any other board members? I have a question. So, I kind of was fascinated watching your presentation, and at the same time thinking about the last presentation. And the Phonics First program, does that kind of help to identify gifted and talented students to an extent?
Well, we definitely know what the standard is at our particular benchmarks, and we've identified those in our standards-based report card rubric. So that'll give us a good understanding of who's above that particular standard. I do want to say that Phonics First will probably stop at the end of grade 2, because at that point, most of the students will not need explicit phonics instruction. It'll be more like a small group thing in grade 3. And that is one of our department goals, is to investigate where do we go next with this group who's had phonics first in K1 and 2. What should spelling look like? We have a good instructional spelling program in grade 3, but we're investigating to see if we can find something better.
Comments from the public? Can you just give me...
Jody Steinhardt. I have a dyslexic child, and I'm dyslexic. Who does the district recognize for diagnosing dyslexia?
So we are not diagnosticians, but we engage in a child study team process. So that would be your first point of access in terms of seeing if a child is of need for special education related services. We also have the PAR assessment, which our teachers have been trained in. So those two areas would be where to go, and you can contact your child study team at each building, or you could reach out to me as a supervisor.
But who would I go to, like if I've done those, and who would you go to that I could bring in and say, this person says my child is dyslexic?
You already have it? You already have like an evaluation or?
Yeah, I do. I have to.
Yeah, bring it into your child.
No, she has it, but I'm just curious on, because when I was going through the process quite a while ago, it wasn't recognized as a learning issue.
Okay. So you mean what kind of a profession?
What kind of professional would diagnose it? Because we went to a learning consultant. My daughter went to her for like 5 years, and then we were told by the district that she cannot diagnose it. So then we did a little more research and went to someone else who could.
Okay, so
I'm just curious, like, who does the district recognize as a doctor to say, here, I've done all these testing, and the district say, yes, she is dyslexic? Because I still, on her 504, they will not write dyslexia.
I think that you have to reach out to the child study team, and maybe there needs to be a follow-up process. And the first avenue would be through the child study team.
So is there an answer of
Yeah,
who is
it could be a neurologist potentially. They'd be able to give you that diagnosis.
So you don't have a specific, my question is,
we don't have a neurologist on staff?
No, I'm not asking the district who the district would hire. I'm saying as a parent, because I've gone different routes and each route seems to close a door. So I was just, for my own personal thing, if I have to have another diagnosis,
Well, you know what?
who would that be?
I don't want you to have to feel like the door is ever closed. So why don't you reach out to us tomorrow or early next week so that we can have a conversation maybe a little bit further, so we can hopefully open that door for you.
So, okay.
But that doesn't answer the question.
Yeah, I don't. To be honest with you, I did answer the question.
All right, excuse me.
I said,
hold on. Hold on. That's not fair.
I did answer the question. I did. Because I said a neurologist could provide a dyslexia diagnosis, and I said that instead of getting into the weeds with an individual case here, which I don't think we should do, talking about individual students and their needs, that we would be more than happy to speak with you after the meeting where we could get in depth. Well, no problem.
Yeah, I don't need to go to that. Then my second question is older kids that can pass the kindergarten, make it through, grammar school, and then they hit middle school, and say 6th, 7th grade, signs come up because I managed to get through school with no help. How does the district deal with the older kids that may have the dyslexia problem, but that's not so severe that it requires, say, hold out, but maybe they need extra time or whatever? With those kids?
So there's various ways, and once again, it's so individualized and different for every single student.
Right.
But to answer your question, it can come in many forms, like Dr. Dean said before. It could be a 504. But before we even get to a 504, it can be an INRS action plan, an intervention and referral services action plan. So the way it works is a continuum of services. You start with general education, and special education is here, and that's what the law says. From general education, if a student is struggling, they should be referred to the intervention and referral services team, INRS team. That does, what it did was, it provides an action plan that teachers could use. So if Janet, teacher, would come and say, this student, Johnny, for instance, is struggling in my class, could potentially have dyslexia, whatever it may be, you give that Janet teacher tools, strategies, interventions to work with. You send them back to Gen Ed teacher, and they work with those students. It could be extended time. It could be an extra set of books or whatever it is. If it works, great. That's all they need are those accommodations, and you have that INRS action plan. What it also does is it stops the overclassification of students just going to special education. If that doesn't work, potentially you may come in with a doctor's note that your son has dyslexia, and we may look at a 504 plan, which is the American with Disabilities Act, because it could stay with them for life, because it's not something that you just cure. You have dyslexia forever. If that doesn't work and it's impacting their education so much, back to Camille's point with the two-prong, it could potentially fall under the specific learning disability classification where dyslexia falls under, and then you would go to special education. So there's a continuum of services where we could service it.
Okay.
I've been out of special ed a little while, so I had to jump in. I'm kind of enjoying watching her field the question.
I just, because I feel like sometimes the older kids, I mean, I managed with no services.
The best way, that I always used to describe it to parents is, the most important thing that we can talk about is early intervention and early intervening. And I apologize if we didn't catch it, but that's why we're here. And we don't ever want anybody to feel that the door is closed. If you have a concern or something like that, our door is always open to help. And, I apologize if you felt that way in the past, and not saying that you did. But early intervention is so important because every year that we don't catch it and we don't help, those gaps widen a little bit more and more. And then when they get into 6th or 7th grade, it's so big, the gap, that it's very hard for us to play catch up.
Right.
So I could see where later in life it is hard and it may be a little bit more prevalent. So, that's our job. And that's why when Gary came to me and Camille said, we have to do this PAR assessment, we could help catch dyslexia a lot earlier. We said, absolutely, let's put whatever we can. That's something we need to work on. So that's why it's something that you're seeing tonight. So it's something that parents brought to us and said, Nick, what are you doing for dyslexia? And it was something that we felt was important to bring to an education committee because it is something that's not discussed a lot. So we wanted to just, have this presentation tonight so we could talk about what we're doing.
So is dyslexia now considered a learning disability? I mean, I know it all depends on, because everybody's dyslexic in a different way. Being one, my daughter isn't the same as I am. But now, is it considered, because I felt like when we first were starting it, that word was almost faux pas in a room. So if you walked in and said, my child's dyslexic, you're not going to look and you go, well, can we call it?
Right, so the special education code was
Updated.
they updated, I forget
Right.
the term right now, in 2014 to include dyslexia as a like a supplemental category under specific learning disability. So yes, it has been updated, but you're right. That was in 2014. IDEA started way back before 2014, so it did take a long time for that kind of update. And we're glad that it did. We want to make sure that students who need the services receive the services. But as Mr. Norcia said, we're really doing I think we're really doing a good job as a school district to embed a lot of these multisensory approaches and train our teachers in these multisensory approaches, not only via our actual daily general ed curriculum, but also sending our teachers for additional training through Orton Gillingham that might be working with our neediest students, whether it's special education or whether it is during our interventionist time.
We do part of our 2-hour training that we do for our teachers and our staff is we show real videos like this, and I say real videos because they're authentic. Not like the Department of Education puts out a training video that we would have been sleeping hours and hours ago. So what we do is we show a 1-hour video like this. One of them even is just all about celebrities that have successful people that have dyslexia. And it's very powerful to watch, and then it's 1 hour of what can we do to help and what type of interventions and strategies that identify it. So that's usually how we do our training in a 2-part period of 2 hours.
Thank you.
Well,
Other questions? Comments? David?
And Mr. Garcia, I talked to you a little bit about this before. What is being done for dyscalculia? I mean, my daughter was diagnosed with that, though not enough to get a 504 because she's actually in advanced math. She's in middle school now, so, but she's had issues with like 2-minute math when she was in numbers switching and those kinds of things, and we were just kind of stunned by that, trying to figure out what that was, and they finally figured out what it was. But what is being done for dyscalculia, and what I don't know. Can you answer that question?
Right. So in the research that I've done on it, I haven't found the same kind of Orton Gillingham approach like we find with the reading piece. But what I've read is that, and what we do provide within the district, are the modifications for students is really what is helpful to that student and who has that condition. For example, it could be manipulatives. It could be, you're saying the 2-minute math, extended time, because they need that extended time. So I could see where that could be, that fluency and automaticity of math facts doesn't come as quickly. They are there. They could do what they need to in life, but the 2-minute math routine may not be always something that they might be able to, espouse. And also computer-based programs to practice those math facts. So, and we do have those computer-based programs within our district through IXL and Connect Ed. So that's what the International Dyslexia Association recommends, and those have been found helpful for students with that kind of condition. So much of it is done through the computer-based learning, and also just like that practice and other modifications.
Yeah, and just for us, it's been like a case by case where we went to the math teacher, like we went to a teacher every year, and then went to the math teacher, like an open school night, and said, hey, here's what, she's not going to talk about, but this is what's going on, and if you see this or this, then you can please know
Right,
what
and also
it is.
just to add one more piece to it, sometimes students with that kind of condition also have difficulty with the language of math problems. It's that could be embedded in it, and what we do teach our students is like there are certain key words that mean certain things in math. There's math language that goes along with each and every single numeric operation, and that's just reinforced over and over and over again. And sometimes it's provided through almost like a modification sheet, or almost like a cheat sheet example to remember that this word means this in a numeric equation. So that's how it's also done as well.
Any other comments from the public? Oh, I'm sorry.
Is there any training available for the parents to try to identify their kids, their dyslexic kids? Because sometimes a kid could be just slow starting. Sometimes we have a lot of international students that just don't speak English as first language. So for a parent to try to see what's happening, why is my kindergarten or first grade not there yet?
Right.
Is there pointers that the district gives to parents?
It's a good idea. When we started Phonics first last year, our literacy coach actually did a 1-hour example of what a lesson might look like, and that gave parents a lot more comfort with this new approach to spelling, where they really wanted to see the pre-test and post-test, and like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Now we don't get to see all the words, and we had to explain that through. And we did some of what we did today, walking them through some of the pattern work, and I think they were a lot more comfortable seeing like the extent to our instruction that supported the pattern work. So, I mean, that's a great suggestion for our parent workshop this year.
We're going to put all these PowerPoints up online, it's on our website as well.
Thank you. And just
Christine, Knoxby.
Thank you.
First of all, I just want to commend the district for taking this initiative and really doing a deep dive into how we can help these kids. I have a daughter in 4th grade at Lincrest who has dyslexia, and I feel like we've come a long way, and I kind of wish I could turn back time because now there's this great program. But one of my questions, or just kind of putting this out to the universe is, you know, are we going to do that? Are we going to send teachers in 4th and 5th grade and 6th grade? Because my daughter can type out. She's like a little OG expert, and I love that. But I don't know when that's going to end for her. And being that she is in 4th grade, you know, she's still working on that carryover. Her red words are horrible. And so just to really think about that, and if that's happening or there's initiative.
So several years ago, we started earmarking some of our title money in the area of professional development for Orton Gillingham, because again, we found that we needed to train our teachers, and so we did it pretty systematically, where we wanted to make sure that we had a resource room teacher in every building that was trained in it. And we wanted to have an early intervention reading person trained in it. So this way we had teachers on the general education side as well as the special education side. So year after year, we're trying to put more and more money into the training for Orton Gillingham. So on the board agenda on October 18th, you will see me proposing, good segue, you will see me proposing 24 teachers from district to go to Orton Gillingham training at a cost of almost $30,000 that we purposely work into the grants. And again, we are trying to do it very systematically all over. We have recognized that while initially it started in the elementary schools, we know we need to train people in the middle and the high school as well. And so there are teachers that will be trained there as well. So it is critical. And again, another big reason for bringing phonics first was because we wanted to expose every child, because every child can benefit from this multisensory approach. It's especially helpful for students that have reading disabilities, but it's a fabulous approach. And so we really do have those plans to continue that. So we started with local funds, and now we're supplementing with funds from the grant because we can send more and more people there.
It's money well spent, considering the numbers, you know, one in 5 kids, so
I think it's
they're
a
going to
great,
benefit.
yes, it's money very well spent, and we want to have those resources in every building.
There's a huge interest by teachers. In order to plan for tonight, I actually went to Lincrest 4th and 5th grade teachers who have strong training already. I forgot to tell you that when we do the arm tapping, your arm comes across your body and activates a lot more parts of your brain. They also taught me today that, you know, one of the reasons why we do the bumpy text is because all the nerve endings in our fingers that are activating on this one. So I mean, there's an interest, there's specialists, and they're not just in the early elementary because the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teachers know that it's important.
And we are, as we hire new teachers, it's something that we look for as well on resumes and interviewing. We get very excited, oh, this person's kind of working good. I'm not saying they're moving to the top, but, you know, give it a good look. Because it's something that we look for in our teachers. And, you know, how many new people did we hire this summer? 61, who's counting? But, you know, we're looking at that. So it's nice to see.
Anyone else from the audience?
I just have
Sure.
one other thing, and it's
No
like,
problem.
just something to consider. And I know you had said this, Camille, about looking at the whole child. It's just stressing the importance of, you know, these kids have average to high intelligence, and you know, of course, you need to use a qualifier to determine who is going to be eligible for special education, but to really look at those writing samples and look at consider informal assessments, and I don't know how much you weigh, 50-50, 75, whatever it is, but to not forget about those, because I feel like the answer lies more in that than how a child is going to do a test.
Thank you.
We agree, thank you.
And No one else from the audience?
I have a
I'm
question.
sorry, Mark.
Jonathan DeCharo.
No problem.
I guess my question is around the fact that trying to catch it early, having screening tests, having early intervention, but then you need that educational impact piece of it, and you talked about compensating factors that you're essentially putting on a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old kid to kind of bring them up to speed if they're having trouble. But you have the tools and the screening process in place to identify it, but you won't. It sounds like there might not be services available to them if they don't have an educational impact. I'm just trying to understand how you're doing everything up front to try to identify it, and you might identify it, but you really can't do anything about it unless there's educational impact.
So that's just for special education. So special education has that two-pronged approach, a bit more stringent category than most. But like Mr. Garcia said, and I think that we're lucky because Dr. Lacatina just said before that we have sent our teachers for training that are interventionist teachers, also who are general education counterparts, as well as special education teachers. So that initial help based on the PAR assessment, based on general teacher assessments like Gary spoke about, first bullet point on our district initiative slide, if there is some sort of markers that we see coming up, that kind of intervention could be given earlier on and may not necessitate a special education document or intervention through special education. So it's not just like we have this and then, okay, see you later. We do have a continuum of resources that we can access. So, we're just like everyone here is saying, we're really taking a hard look at this. We do want to see the whole child. We want to see everything that is going on, and I think that everything is a case-by-case basis, but we do have those kind of pre-intervention points that we can utilize, as well as special education.
One of our best resources is our teacher collaboration. So we've created evidence-based practices using our level literacy intervention program, but then also the Wharton training. So whereas the intervention program used to just have like a quick 10-minute word sort activity as their phonics instruction, now the teachers, because they have the Wharton training, can not stop short of just that word sort, but they can also do some multisensory pieces, and we're seeing great success with that. So that's one of the things I like about our program is we don't stick to fidelity to any one program. We really think about the needs of the kids and just try to be reflective based on the context in our school. So I feel like we're setting the bar for a great program. Level literacy intervention wouldn't tell you to use a little Wharton with it. Wharton wouldn't tell you to use the level literacy intervention to have the reading comp. To be smart enough to know enough about the programs and our kids that we need to mix a little bit together.
Okay, Mark's question. Mark, 10 o'clock.
Yeah, almost switching it. I just wanted to comment on the parent workshop. I think that was a great idea, but I believe that you had mentioned just basically identifying the child at an early time. So what I'd like to do is possibly even expand that and give parents the opportunity to deal with coping with it, and also to have additional ways of how to help their child at home when they're doing their homework. I just wanted to bring that to your attention as well.
Good idea. Any other board members? All right, that was a very nice presentation. Very impressive. I want to, before we end, I just want to, I want to thank, first of all the principals. There was this battering of principals that came out, but some. But this always amazes me at education committee meetings, because not just the supervisors that are making the presentation come, but most of the supervisors always come out to our education committee meetings and they support the other supervisors. And that's what, in my time on the board, I've always noticed that this cohesiveness amongst the different supervisors, and I think that just is a benefit to the district all the time. So I want to thank you guys for coming out, because it's been it is a great night. And thank you, the public, for coming out and giving us your take on things, what you would like to see us look at and your suggestions, because obviously we're here to educate every child in Fairland. So I think it was a very productive meeting, and I look forward to seeing how these things get implemented and how we can improve in the future, always moving forward. Thank you.